All right, Shevuos, say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning share. To thank our annual Talmud Torah sponsor, Tilson Mishpacha Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all of the shiurim and drashos this year as a zechus for Besoros Tovos for Am Yisrael. Our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Iyar Haba Leinu L'Tova Shmuel Rabbi Karapkin, in creation of the yard site of Shmuel's father, Leonard Krapin, Lipa Ben Yecheskel HaKohen Zichron Lebrach. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshama Slav and Aliyah, the family Zein Nechama, all of those who need a refuah Shevan Kedol Kol Cholei Yisrael, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shalom Yeretz Hashem, bring home our hostages. B'Shalom and B'Karav and our holy soldiers should be successful. B'Chol Ma'asei Yedehem. But with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today, Baruch Hashem. Great daf ahead of us. Today's daf is Yud Daled 14. We are picking up Emirat Hashem on Yud Gimel Amud Beis. Yud Gimel Amud Beis. Sorry. Okay, we are picking up Yud Gimel Amud Beis, and we left off actually Umani Rabbi Hudahi, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, about 15 lines down from the top. So just a very quick review. So remember again, the Gemara is now focusing on the end of our Mishnah. And essentially, the Gemara pointed out as follows, that Rabbi Huda, who is the view reflected in our Mishnah, says as follows, that when it comes to Ser Mishtaleach, when it comes, right, that is the goat that is thrown off the cliff, so halacha l'maisa, again, that goat is mechaper for everything. All Averus, and ultimately, again, mechaper for everyone. So that's Kohanim, Yisraelim, even Kohen Gadol. So wherein lies the unique, wherein lies the distinction between the kapara of, let's say, for example, the Kohanim and Yisraelim? So that lies in one very specific area, namely Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav. That if there's any type of infraction, let's say regarding entering into the Beis HaMikdash in a state of Tumah, or consuming Kodesh in a state of Tumah, so Kohanim find kapara through the par, and Yisraelim find kapara through the inner seir. So that's the distinction between the kapara of Kohanim, Yisraelim, and Yom Kippur. But for everything else, everyone is covered by the seir la'azazel. By the way, there's two ways the Gemara refers to it. It's either seir la'azazel, which means the goat that's sent into the wilderness, or the seir hamishhtaleach, the seer that is sent. It's the same animal, same carbon. Okay, beautiful. So the Gemara says, Umani Rabbi Hudahi. Who's the pain? Does this reflect? It's Rabbi Huda, this sign, because we learned, here we go, V'chiper es HaKodesh. Sorry, V'chiper es Mikdash HaKodesh, Zel Lifnai V'Lifnim. So now, both what the Gemara is going to do is as follows. The Gemara is taking the pasuk by Yom Kippur, again, Parshas Achremos, and going to go through it as follows. Remember, so the pasuk as it reads is V'chiper es Mikdash HaKodesh, Ves Oel Moed. So they will atone from Mikdash HaKodesh. Let me read to you the pasuk in its entirety. Right, Ves Oel Moed, and also the Oel Moed, which is the Mishkan, the Beis HaMikdash. Ves HaMizbeach, and the altar. Yechaper ultimately will be redeemed. V'al Kohanim, v'al Kol Am Hakal. V'al Kohanim, v'al Kol Am Hakal Yechaper. And on the Kohanim and on the entire Kehillah will be atoned. So now the Gemara breaks up this pasuk. Here we go. So the Gemara says, V'chiper es Mikdash HaKodesh, Zeh Lifnai V'Lifnim. This refers to Tumah infractions that occurred inside of the Beis HaMikdash. Es Oal Moed, or I should say Lifnai V'Lifnim really means the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Es Oal Moed, Zeh Heichal. That refers to the Heichal. Mizbeach Kimashma'o. So all of these refer to different Tumah infractions that may have occurred within different parts of the Beis HaMikdash. Yechaper, Elu Azaros. This refers to the Azaros. Kohanim, Kimashma'on, Am HaKahal, who's Am HaKahal, Elu Yisrael. Yechaper will be atoned. Elu Halavim. So the Gemara says, Hushvu Kulan Lekapara Achos, Shemiskapin B'Sir HaMishtaleach B'Shar Averos Tiv Rabbi Yehuda. So what's happening over here? The pasuk is establishing a certain what we'll call kapara commonality, meaning that all members of Klal Yisrael reach kapara in the same way. Which kapara is that referring to? That is referring to the kapara for all general averos. All general averos. Now, both say, remember again, all general averos essentially is going to include everything except Tumah-related infractions. So for all general averos, all of Klal Yisrael is atoned for in the same way. Which way is that? The Seir HaMishtaleach. the goat that's sent over the cliff. That's Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Shimon says no. Rabbi Shimon disagrees. He says, Kashem shedam asayir ha'na'aseh b'fnim mechaper al Yisrael al tumas mikdash v'kadashav. So Rabbi Shimon says like this. So again, essentially what we're finding over here, and this is really quite riveting, are just two different kapara models. That's really what's unfolding in front of us over here. So Rabbi Shimon says like this. Rabbi Shimon disagrees. He says the same way, Kashem shedam seir ha'na'aseh b'fnim. In the same way that halacha l'maisa, the seir of the seir, the dam of the seir of na'aseh b'fnim. So remember again, that's the inner goat. In the same way that halacha l'maisa, again, the dam of the inner goat is mechaper on Klal Yisrael, on the Jews, meaning specifically Yisraelim. Al tumas mikdash v'kadoshav, for tumah-related infractions. Kach dam par mechaper ala kohanim al tumas mikdash v'kadoshav. So again, at this point, Rabbi Shimon is not disagreeing, right? Rabbi Shimon is saying like this. Rabbi Shimon is highlighting the following idea. He's saying, in the same way that when it comes to Tumas Mikdash Vikadashav, ultimately there's two different mechanisms of kapara, right? Let's go back for just a second. We'll say, what's Tumas Mikdash Vikadashav? I enter into the base of Mikdash in a state of Tumah without realizing it, right? Or I go ahead and I consume Kodesh in a state of Tumah without realizing it. How do you achieve kapara for that? It depends. What does it depend on? Who you are. If you're a Kohen, you're going to be atoned for that through the power of Yom Kippur. If you are Yisrael, you're going to be atoned for that through the blood application of the inner seir, the inner goat. So Rabbi Shimon says, just like when it comes to Tumah, there's a different kapara mechanism for a Yisrael and for a Kohen, so too, I'm sorry. Kashim shed damasir nasa b'fnim mechapra al Yisrael tumas v'dish v'kadashav. Kach tamapar mechapra al kohen al tumas v'dish v'kadashav. Ukashim sheviduyav shel sir mishtaleach mechapra al Yisrael b'shar averos. And the same way that the confession for the sir mishtaleach, which is the goat that is sent out to the wilderness, in the same way that that confession atones for Klal Yisrael for all general averos, so too, kach Viduyav shalpar mechaper ala kohanim b'shar averos. So too, the confession over the par will take care of all other averos for the kohanim. So look what's happened over here. This is really quite fascinating. So a fundamental machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon about the framework of kapara for Yom Kippur. So Rabbi Shimon is saying is like this. In the same way that kapara for Tumah is fundamentally different for Kohanim and Yisraelim, Rabbi Shimon says, therefore, the framework for kapara for all Averos is going to be different for Kohanim and Yisraelim. So what is that? So let's go through this. So in Rabbi Shimon's model, so for Tumah, Yisraelim are atoned through the inner seir and Kohanim through the par. So too for Shar Averos, Yisraelim are atoned for through the vidu, through the confession of the Sir HaMishtaleach, and ultimately Kohanim are atoned for through the confession on the par. That's Rabbi Shimon's model. So therefore, Rabbi Shimon, interestingly enough, Kohanim and Yisraelim have two different avenues of kapara on Yom Kippur for everything. Now again, let's go back. Rabbi Huda disagrees. Rabbi Huda says the only distinction between Kohanim and Yisraelim is in the realm of Tumah. Right? Again, and everybody's agreeing on the Tumah piece, right? That Kohanim will be atoned for through the par, and Yisraelim through the inner seir. But for all other Averos, according to Rabbi Huda, everyone, Kohanim and Yisraelim are atoned for through the Sir Mishtaleach. Okay, so fundamental machlokes in the framework of kapara. Incredible. Or Rabbi Shimon, havadai hushvu, my hushvu. So Rabbi Shimon, here's the issue. The pasuk that we just quoted clearly creates a commonality in kapara, right? Creates a certain common theme, a common thread for kapara. It seems to unite all of Klal Yisrael in a kapara process. But according to you, Rabbi Shimon, there's two distinct avenues of kapara that are unfolding like in a parallel sense for Kohanim and for Yisrael. So what's going on over here? Well, the Gemara says, my hushvu, so how is there a commonality? The b'nei kapara ninhu, the Gemara says, mihu, kol chad v'chad nechaper b'nei nafshayu. So Rabbi Shimon will say like this. What the pasuk is saying is as follows. There's kapara for everyone, which is actually a beautiful thing, right? There is kapara for everyone. So whether you're a Kohen, a Levi, a Yisrael, whatever you are, there is kapara for you. That's the commonality in the kapara experience. But that's where the commonality ends. What happens after that? Everyone has their own avenue of kapara. Incredible. So the Gemara says, so that's the machlokes. So the Gemara says, my time to Rabbi Shimon. So what's Rabbi Shimon's logic? Right? What's Rabbi? So again, I will say, essentially, what it really comes down to is like this. Let's start with what everybody agrees with. What does everybody agree with? What does everybody agree with? Tumah. Everyone agrees that the mechanism for Tumah Kapara is the same, right? In other words, I shouldn't say the same. Everyone agrees on the mechanism. Yisraelim are atoned for through the inner seir, and Kohanim through the par. These are both offerings of Yom Kippur. Okay, so wherein lies the machlokes? The machlokes is really about the seir la'azazel. In Rabbi Huda's model, everyone is atoned for. Everyone is atoned for in the seir la'azazel for all averos. In Rabbi Shimon's model, Yisraelim are atoned through the seir, and Kohanim are atoned for through the par, specifically the vidui of the par. Okay, so the Gemara says, my time is Rabbi Shimon. So specifically, why is it that Rabbi Shimon holds that the seir is not mechaper for Kohanim? Tichsiv v'lokach eshnei asirim. So the Gemara says v'lokach eshnei asirim. So the pasuk says you shall take the two goats. So remember again, this is the remember what are the two goats? What is the sir nasa b'fnim, right? What we call the sir lahashem. That's going to be offered up as a karban, and the other is the sir lazazel, going to be pushed off the cliff. So the Gemara says iskish sir mishtaleach the sir nasa b'fnim. So the Torah equates the two sirim. Torah equates the two goats. The goat that is pushed off the cliff, and the goat that is done on the inside, the Sir Hashem, Masir Hanase Bifnim, Eino Mechaper Al Kohanim Al Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav. So just like the inner seir is not Mechaper for Kohanim. Remember again, Abosai, everyone's agreeing. What is the inner seir doing? What is it doing? It's for Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav, for Yisraelim. For Yisraelim. So just like the inner seir doesn't help Kohanim, so the Gemara says, right, it's not mechaber for Kohanim, asher la'am, because the pasuk says specifically that inner seir is for the am. Who is the am in this context? The am in this context is Yisraelim. So to af seir hamishtalech eino mechaper ala kohanim b'shar averos. So again, so Rabbi Shimon will say, so too the outer seir, meaning the seir mishtaleach, is not mechaper for kohanim as well. So essentially, we'll say this is fascinating. So what Rabbi Shimon's model is really predicated on is like this: the Torah itself creates equality between the seirim. What does that equality mean? Essentially, the same way that the sir na'aseh b'fnim, the inner seir, the sir la'Hashem, is not mechaper on Kohanim, because it's only mechaper for the tumah for Yisraelim. So to the sir mishtaleach is not mechaper for Kohanim as well. It's only mechaper for the averos of Yisraelim. That's Rabbi Shimon's logic. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Huda. So what does Rabbi Huda, now again, I will say, so what does Rabbi Huda do with this comparison between the two sirim? What does he do with that? Rabbi Huda, Amar Lacha, Lahachi Iskish. I'll tell you why the two sirim are compared. Sheyuhu Shavim B'mara, Uvekoma, Uvedamim Huda Asa. The pasuk is coming to create an equality between the sirim, saying that they have to be the same in their appearance, in their height, and in their value. That's what it means. But it does not mean that they are the same in terms of their ability to affect kapara. So I will say it's a really fascinating fundamental machlokes. And again, I will say what's really incredible about this is, here's the beauty. What's the beauty of this machlokes? Or I should say the good news, everyone is getting kapara. Don't worry, don't lose any sleep. Everyone is getting kapara. The machlokes is on the delivery mechanism of that kapara. So once again, I say, just get this clear. So Rabbi Huda himself is holding the sir mishtaleach atones for everyone for all averos. Everyone for all averos. So where is the distinction? According to Rabbi Huda, the distinction is only in one limited area, namely Tumah. Tumah for Yisraelim, they're going to be atoned for through the inner seir. For Kohanim, they're going to be atoned for through the par. Rabbi Shimon essentially says no. The same way that Kohanim, Leviim, the same way that Kohanim are distinct from Yisrael for Tumah, so too Rabbi Shimon just says they're distinct for everything. Distinct for everything. And therefore, halacha l'maisa, they're not included in the sir mishtaleach. Rather, they get their kapara for shar averos from the vidui on the par. Incredible. So he says, Man tanaluhu, the Tan Rabbanon, so is the author of the following idea, V'shachat asir achatas asher la'am. So the pasuk says, the Kohen will shecht the seir chatas that is for the nation. This is the inner seir now, the inner seir. She'ena kohanim is kaprimbo. Kohanim do not achieve kapara through this seir. So the Gemara says, Ubamam is kaprin. So how do they achieve kapara? Now, both say specifically what kind of kapara we're talking about. Rabbi Pashto says kapara for tumah. So the Gemara says, Beparo shel Aaron. They get atonement through the power of Aaron. Okay, so the Gemara says, Yachol lo yiskapru beparo shel Aaron. You might have thought that Kohanim, other Kohanim, cannot get kapara through the power of Aaron. After all, Shari Kvar Nemar, because the pasuk already says, Asher lo. So interestingly enough, when it comes to the power of Aaron, what does the pasuk say? Asher lo. What does Asher lo mean? What does Asher lo mean? It's his. So I might have thought that literally, again, the power of Aaron only works for Aaron. Only works for Aaron. To which the Gemara says, Me'ata, Asher lo, Me'ata, Elan kapara. But if that's the case, so if Kohanim don't get kapara through the seir hana'asa bifnim, the inner seir, and they don't get kapara through the power of Aaron, so then we have a problem. What's the problem? Where do Kohanim get kapara from? So the Gemara says, Kishu Omer, Yechaper ala Kohanim, when the pasuk ultimately says, speaking about the power of Aaron, Yechaper ala Kohanim, Masina lahen kapara. Right? I'm sorry, I should say that I should get in that. I can't have myself. When the pasuk says Yechaper ala Kohanim, the pasuk says that there is kapara for the Kohanim. So Masina lahen kapara. We see that Kohanim do get kapara. What do they get kapara from? B'mahim miskaprim, mutav sheis kapru b'paro shel Aaron, shari husar michlalo eitzel beiso. It makes more sense that Kohanim will get kapara through the power of Aaron. Why? Because Rabbi say, interestingly enough, as much as the Torah calls the power of Aaron asher lo, that's his, the Torah also makes an exception to that, that's his. What's the exception? His family. So Aaron's family is included. So it makes sense to say that once Aaron's family is included in the par, so too what? So too, other Kohanim should be included in the par as well. But Kohanim will not be included in the inner seir, where no exception was made for any member of the Kohanic family. First wide line, and if you would like to say, Harehu Omer, Beis Aaron Baruch Hu Es Hashem, Beis Halevi Baruch Hu Es Hashem, Yirei Hashem Baruch Hu Es Hashem. And if you want another proof to this, look at this passage. I will say it's not immediately clear what that proof is. The Gemara is going to explain the Braisa now, and everything will become clear. So the Gemara says, Mantana, who's the author of this Braisa we just quoted? Rabbi Yirmiyah, Delok Rabbi Huda. It's not Rabbi Huda. Why not? Because they both say, what did the Braisa say? The Braisa said that Kohanim are not atoned for through the Sir Mishtaleach. Now, if it was Rabbi Huda, the Rabbi Huda, Ha'amar Kohanim, Yeshlan Kapara B'Sir Mishtaleach. Ultimately, again, Rabbi Huda holds, Rabbi Huda holds that even Kohanim are atoned for through the Sir HaMishtaleach. The Gemara says, Ummani, so whose opinion is it? Rava Amar, Rabbi Shimon, it must be Rabbi Shimon, Damar Kohanim, Eilan Kapara B'Sir Mishtaleach. Because again, Rabbi Shimon is of the opinion that Kohanim do not achieve atonement through the Sir Mishtaleach. Rather, again, according to Rabbi Shimon, Kohanim achieve atonement ultimately through what? Through the vidui on the par. Abaye says not necessarily. I feel Tim Rabbi Huda. The price could even be Rabbi Huda. How so? It means to say me'ata. You might have thought that when you look at Kohanim have no mechanism for tara, no mechanism for kapara, for tumas mikdash v'kadashav. Kishu omer yechaper ala Kohanim. When the pasuk says Kohanim will achieve atonement, matzinu sheyish lahen kapara b'shar averos. We do find that Kohanim will have kapara for other averos. We'll say last line, Yud Gimel Amud Beis, ukimo d'matzinu sheyish lahen kapara b'shar averos, and the same way that Kohanim have kapara for other averos, kach yeshlan kapara top of Yudalid bitumas mikdash v'kadashav. So therefore, again, in the same way that the Torah tells us, and like we'll say, Torah doesn't tell us how, but explicitly how, but the Torah does tell us that Kohanim achieve kapara for shar averos. So the same way that the Kohanim are going to get kapara for shar averos, they also should what? Get kapara for tumas mikdash v'kadashav. Top of Yudalid 14a, first end of the first line. B'mehe miskaprim. But how do Kohanim achieve kapara? Mutav sheis kapru b'paro shel Aaron. It makes sense that at least for Tumah, they should be covered under They should be covered under the par of Aaron. Why? Because halacha l'maisa, there is already an exception, even though, again, the Torah calls the par of Aaron asher lo, which makes it like it's only for him, but it also includes his family. Once it includes his family, it makes sense to what? Also include other Kohanim. Incredible. So it makes more sense to include them in the par of Aaron, where there's already an allowance for his family, as opposed to the inner seer, where there is no allowance for other Kohanim. Rather, again, it's clearly made to function for Yisraelim. And if you'd like to say, Harehu Omar, in addition to that, you can also say, Beis Aaron Baruch Hu Es Hashem, my im nafshech Omar. What exactly is the Gemara doing by bringing that pasuk? I'll tell you why. You'll say, but how can you do that? The pasuk explicitly says that the par is only works for who? For Aaron ubeso, and which sounds like what? His immediate family. So how can you include the rest? Gans Kohanim. How can you include the rest of Kohanim in the family of Aaron? What's the answer? The Gemara says, Kulon Kruyin Beso. All Kohanim are called the family of Aaron. Where do we know that from? Shneemar Beis Aaron Baruch Hu Es Hashem. Who's Beis Aaron? Who's Beis Aaron? Gans Kohanim, right? All Kohanim. And therefore, what do you see from here? When the Torah makes an allowance, ultimately, again, for the family of Aaron to achieve atonement through the par, who is included in the family of Aaron? The entire kahuna. Incredible. So the Gemara says, Shneimar Beis Aaron Baruch Hu Es Hashem, Yirei Hashem Baruch Hu Es Hashem. Incredible. So the Gemara says, V'hai Asher La'am La'ach Asa. But one second, is that phrase, Asher La'am? Now the Gemara wanted to suggest beforehand that the pasuk by the Siyar Nasa Befnim, the pasuk by the inner seer says Asher La'am. Asher La'am, the Gemara interprets to mean it only works for atonement for Yisraelim, but not for Kohanim. Interesting, it's coming to exclude Kohanim. It's a very interesting drasha, by the way, because generally the way these types of drashas work are generally Yisraelim are excluded from Kohanim. Here it's fascinating to see a drasha where Kohanim are excluded from Yisraelim, and Kohanim are excluded from that phrase called Am, which is fascinating in and of itself. That is, I just want to point out something incredible. That as much as there is kedushas kahuna, there's something better than kedushas kahuna. I'm sorry, Kohanim, right? You know what's better than kedushas kahuna? Kedushas Am. Kedushas Am is the most powerful. Now, again, it doesn't mean Kohanim aren't part of Kedushas Am, but there is something ultimately, again, to the Kedusha of the masses that the Kohanim don't have, and there's something powerful about the Kedusha of the Kahuna that the masses don't have. Everyone has their own unique Kedusha. Incredible. So the Gemara goes back to Asher La'am, so the Gemara says, V'hai Asher La'am La'ach Yudasa. But one second, is that what that phrase comes for? Is that phrase used to teach us that Kohanim are excluded from the Siyar Nasa Befnim? So Gemara says, Hami Be'elei D'kam Rachmana Mida'am Lehavi. That pasuk is answering for something else. That the money for the Siyar Nasa Befnim has to come from the communal coffers. In other words, Rabbi say, if I come along and I say, you know what? Truth is, I would take this opportunity. Imagine somebody said to you, there's a dedication opportunity open, right? Dedication opportunity to dedicate and to sponsor the Sir HaNa'aseh B'fnim of Yom Kippur. I would say, who would not take that opportunity, right? So again, the Gemara says, sorry, not open, taken. It's got to come from communal funds, which I would say is fascinating in and of itself. Now, why does it have to come from communal funds? Because it's a communal offering. Communal offerings cannot be privately sponsored. Communal offerings must come from communal, which I will say is also a fascinating yesod. There's a place, I should say, there's a lot of places for private donations, right? But then there are certain things that have to come from the tzibur, certain things that all of us need to get involved in and cannot be carried by any one individual. So the Gemara says, mida'am, when it says that the carbon comes from the am, that means that the carbon has to come from communal funds. That's what it's teaching us, not to exclude Kohanim. Hami baile, to come rachmana mida'am lehavi. The Gemara says, the Gemara says, no, that's learned out from a different source. So the Gemara says, no, we learn out the fact that it has to come from communal funds from that phrase of me'es adas b'nei Yisrael, that the carbon has to come from adas b'nei Yisrael. I v'hai asher lo lahachihuda asa. Rabbi say, does that phrase asher lo come to teach me that halacha l'maisa only the Kohen, right? Only the Kohen achieves kapara through his power? Someone says, "Hi, mi boile. We need that shalo for something else." Chedesanya, mishalahu mevi ve'ino mevi mishal sibor. I will say this is interesting. In the same way that the sir na'aseh b'fnim, the inner seer of Yom Kippur, has to come from communal funds, cannot be privately sponsored. The power of the Kohen Gadol must come from his own money and cannot come from communal funds. So the Gemara says, "Yachol lo yavi mishal sibor shenat sir miskabrim bo." Now you might have thought, okay, so the Kohen Gadol, he can't bring his power from communal funds. You know why? Because the power of the Kohen Gadol does not affect communal tara, does not affect communal kapara. But I might have thought that perhaps he can make a collection amongst his fellow Kohanim and go ahead and bring the power from that money, since Kohanim do get kapara from it. Talmud lomar asher lo. Therefore, the pasuk says no. Even though, as we've established, that the power will atone for other Kohanim, it must be paid for by the Kohen Gadol himself. Yachol lo yavi v'imhevi kasher. So you might have thought, okay, ideally, the Kohen Gadol should not bring a power that is not paid for by his own money. But if he brought that kind of power, it should still be kosher. Talmud lo shuv asher lo. So therefore, the pasuk says a second time that the power has to belong to the Kohen Gadol, saying Shana alav akasav la'akev. We'll say sometimes in the Torah says something twice. Is to teach you what? That it's leikuva, that you have to have, that this is an indispensable piece of information. And therefore, again, it's not just that l'chatrila, the power should be bought with the Kohen Gadol's money, but if it's not, it's okay anyway. No, it's got to be bought with his money, and if it's not, the power itself is going to be puzzle. So the Gemara says, Tana hachi kakashile. This is what the Tana was bothered by. Maishna bid'am delo mechaper. The Gemara says, why is it that ultimately, again, why is it that ultimately the am is not why mashna b'da'am delo mechaper? Why is it that halacha l'maisa that the am is not included in the kapara? The Gemara says delo kachasri be mamone dichsiv asher la'am. So ultimately, again, I will say this is incredible. You cannot achieve kapara in something you did not spend money on. Isn't that incredible? You cannot achieve kapara with something you did not spend money on. Kapara requires sacrifice. If you're not willing to give up something, kapara is not achievable. I will say, we see this concept in many different ways. Sometimes what stands in our way of becoming true Bali Tshuva? Let's be honest, right? It's too early not to be honest, right? What stands in our way of not becoming true Bali Tshuva is we're really not willing to give up certain things, and we're not willing to stop doing certain things that stand in our way. In other words, I have a sincere desire to be a better person, and I have a sincere desire to change my life. I'm just unwilling to let go of certain things that are holding me back. Chazal have a term for this. What is it called? It's called tovel v'sheretz biyado. Right? So all of us have our shrutzim in life that we hold on to. Right? It's the things that I know are not good, they're not healthy, they're not helpful, they're toxic, maybe they're sinful, or maybe they're just detrimental, right? And I know it. But here I am, right? I'm strutting off to the mikvah, right? Doing my thing, ready to achieve tara, and I'm dunking. And again, the mikvah represents all the beautiful things that I'm doing in life, and it's all incredible. And then I'm wondering, but I'm doing all this great stuff, but why am I not getting traction? And it's very simple. Look what you're holding on to. Look what I'm holding on to. I'm holding on to all of those shrutzim. As long as you hold on to the sheretz, you could go into the most beautiful mikvah. You could engage in all the most positive and beautiful dynamic activity in life. It'll help, but you're not going to get anywhere. I don't get anywhere in life until I let go of my shrutzim. True kapara requires sacrifice. True kapara requires excising certain things from my being so I can move myself forward. So Gemara says, do you know how I know that Yisraelim are not included in the kapara of the par. Do you know how I know that? Because it didn't cost them anything. And if it doesn't cost you anything, you're not getting kapara. Kapara requires sacrifice. Purity requires sacrifice. Growth requires sacrifice. Whether it's sacrifice of my money, sacrifice of my time, or sacrifice of the shrutzim, the stuff that I've been holding on to for a very long time that is actively holding me back. And again, we'll say the reality is, most of us go through life and we never let go of our shrutzim. Now, the good news is, even if you, kind of good news, even if you never let go of your shrutzim, could you accomplish great stuff in life? Can you accomplish? Yeah, you absolutely can. But you never fully self-actualize. You never fully become the best version of you because I'm refusing to let go of the stuff that at the end of it, you know what it's like? It's like, you ever get a stain on your shirt, right underneath the area where you wear your tie? Right? It only happens to me. I guess I might be the only person left who wears ties, right? That might be it. Okay, got it. Right? So you know what's interesting about it is you have to walk around fully self-conscious all the time, right? Because as long as my tie lies straight, I'm good to go. But if I turn a little too quickly or something else, it's right there. It's right there. To me, it's often become a tremendous metaphor for life. Instead, what could I do? I could change my shirt, right? I could actually, but you know what? I've been wearing it for 4 days already. I'm kind of like, we're good. We've kind of grown accustomed to one another. Everything is nice. Everything is fine. So it's okay as long as the tie remains perfectly centered. We're good to go. We're good to go. And I will say it's a tremendous metaphor in life. Instead, just put on a clean shirt. Just put on a clean shirt. And life is so much easier. You don't have to worry about the positioning of the tie. But I like it. I kind of got used to it. Even kind of like Stain and I, we've become one. So we go through life like that so much that we hold on to those shrutzim and we just never let go. Instead of realizing, and again, I can accomplish and it's great and I look nice and I look fine. Instead of finding the courage to let go of the shrutzim, make the sacrifice. Let go of the stuff and move yourself forward. So the Gemara says, that's how I know there's no kapar for the am. So the Gemara says, B'da'aro nami lo kachasi b'mamona. B'ka'amar Kula and Kruyin base. But 1 second. But that doesn't make any sense. Because you just said before that the Kohanim do achieve kapara through the par, and yet they did not spend any money on it. So what's going on? So the Gemara said because they're included in base. So Bishlam Rabbi Shimon Hainu Dichsev Trevi Duyin. So according to Rabbi Shimon, this makes sense. That's why it says again 2 viduis, right? There's 2 viduis mentioned, also the blood application of the par. Chad kineged sir na'aseh b'fnim, so one corresponding to the inner seer. The chad kineged sar na'aseh b'chutz, and one corresponding to the outer seer. The seer mishtaleach. The chad kineged seer na'aseh b'chutz. The chad kineged haser mishtaleach. Ella Rabbi Huda Trevi duyin v'dama par lamli. But according to Rabbi Huda, ultimately, again, why do I need 2 viduis in a par? I don't need 3 altogether. I only need 2. Lamali chad vidui v'damo sagya. All I need is 1 application and 1 dam. So the Gemara says, Echalo v'echal lebei. So ultimately, again, 1 is for the Kohen Gadol and 1 is for his family. So Gemara said, the time of the Rabbi Shmuel, kachi midas hadin no hages. Here is how midas hadin works. Mutav yavo zakai v'yechaper ala chayiv v'al yavo chayiv v'yechaper ala chayiv. It is better ultimately, again, that the zakai, the innocent one, will achieve atonement for the one who is liable, and don't let the liable one achieve atonement for the one who is liable. In other words, it will say, the Kohen Gadol is the architect for kapara for everyone, for himself, for his fellow Kohanim, and for Gans Klal Yisrael. Therefore, it only makes sense that the architect of kapara, or I should say the quarterback, not the architect, Kadosh Baruch is the architect, the quarterback of kapara should first what? Achieve his own level of kapara and then be the quarterback for everyone else. Because if the Kohen Gadol himself is not tahar, how is he going ahead? And if he doesn't have kapara, how is he achieving it on behalf of everyone else? Which also in and of itself is a beautiful Musar skill, that if you want to accomplish things on behalf of other people, First, make sure your own house is in order. You want to raise inspired children, make sure that you're an inspired individual. You want to go ahead and encourage others to become the best version of themselves, make sure you're living your best life. So we'll say, ultimately, again, that's our episode. Okay, so now we have a ton of information over here. So first of all, like, how do we paskin? And there's a number of different things going on over here. Number one, in this model, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, how are we passing? Specifically, Rabbi, so what this comes down to is as follows. That what's the point of contention? Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, Seir HaMishtaleach LaAzazel, right? The seir that's sent over the cliff. Does that only atone for Yisraelim? That is Rabbi Shimon's model. Only Yisraelim, not Kohanim. Kohanim get their kapara through the par. Or is it mechaper for everyone? Everyone, that's Rabbi Yehuda. Because remember again, when it comes to Tumah, everyone is agreeing on the kapara framework. For Tumah, Yisraelim are atoned for through the inner seer, and Kohanim are atoned for through the par. The shaila is, what does the seer do? So I will say, here it is, the much-awaited, long-anticipated, much-anticipated Rambam, Seir Mishtaleach. So I'll say, see here, first of all, the Rambam says when it comes to Seir Mishtaleach, the Rambam writes, Seir Mishtaleach, Lefishu kapara l'kol Yisrael, Kohen Gadol misvad alav aloshon kol Yisrael shneimar v'isvad alav es kol avonos b'nei Yisrael. Seir Mishtaleach mechaper al kol averos sheba Torah. The seer goes ahead and atones for everything, all averos. The Gemara says hakalos v'chamuros, intense averos, less intense averos, zodon, shogig, knew about it, didn't know about it. Everything is atoned for through tshuva. Not only that, the Rambam says it atones for everyone. So we paskin at the end of the day like Rabbi Yehuda. The Seir Mishtaleach atones for everyone, for all averos. However, the Rambam adds in a very important caveat. What's the important caveat? V'hu sha'asa tshuva. V'hu sha'asa tshuva. So I'm sorry, you can't sleep through Yom Kippur. Right? So this goes back to yesterday's daf. Machlokes Rebbe and the Rabbanon. Right? How does Yom Kippur work? Remember again, Rebbe said, Itzumo shel Yom Mechaper, the essence of the day atones. According to Rebbe, even if you don't daven, even if you're right, it was even better, according to Rebbe, right? Even if what? Even if you eat on Yom Kippur, right? Even if you do malach on Yom Kippur, the day itself atones for you. The Rabbanan say, yes, the day atones for you, but you need to unlock the atonement power of the day through what? Through tshuva. The Rambam paskins like the Rabbanan. Right, the halacha l'maaseh Yom Kippur is the most powerful day in the world, but the power of the day must be unlocked through tshuva. Now, both say, you say to yourself something like you say, "Oh, I was kind of hoping like for the other way about this," right? No, so just understand this actually works in our favor. This works in our favor. Why does it work in our favor? Because the Rambam says in the next halacha, Bizman shein beis hamikdash kayim, ve'ein lanu mizbeach kapara. So remember again, now that unfortunately there is no beis hamikdash, and now that there is no altar upon which to achieve kapara, ein sham elo tshuva, hatshuva michaperes al kol averos. So remember again, Abosai, as beautiful as it was to read Rebbe's position, that ultimately, again, it's sumo shel yom mechaper, that the day itself atones, or even according to Rebbe, that atonement was unlocked through the seir, through the Seir Mishtaleach, which means, as beautiful as Rebbe's model is, it's fantastic when the Beis HaMikdash stood. But if the Beis HaMikdash is not standing, then what do we do? The beauty that we have, Rabbi Osai, is even in the absence of the Beis HaMikdash, the Rambam says, we have something more powerful than the Beis HaMikdash. Can you imagine saying that? We have said each of us possesses something more powerful than the Beis HaMikdash. We possess something more powerful than the Mizbeach. We possess something more powerful than the Seir HaAzazel. What is that called? Tshuva. The most powerful force in the entire universe is the power of tshuva. And about like the Gemara said yesterday, and when can you access that most powerful force in the world? Any time you want. The Seir LaAzazel could only be mechaper once a year on Yom Kippur. The Kohen Gadol could only go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim once a year. But you and I could access the most powerful force in the universe, namely tshuva, when? Each and every moment. Incredible. All right, Rabbi, that's the halacha. Mazel tov on our first parak of Masechah Shevuos. What a ride. What a ride. Incredible. Okay, it's only going to get better. Let's go. Yidiyas HaTumah. Stein Shein Arba. So we'll say, now actually, this is a repeat of the first Mishnah. So we're back to Tumah. I know you thought we were done with Tumah. We are not. More Tumah to come. Tumah everywhere. So the Gemara says as follows: Yedios hatumah shtayim sheinaris. Remember again, we saw this already before. There are two biblical cases that are really four. Now again, what are they? Now we're experts in this already. What are the two biblical cases? Two biblical cases are: I forgot that I was tamei, but I remember. So again, two cases, right? I became tamei. I forgot. I entered into the Beis HaMikdash. I remembered afterwards that I was tamei. I became tamei. I knew that. I forgot. I ate kodesh, and then I remembered afterwards that I was tamei. Okay, so those are the two biblical cases. So what we call halam tumah. I forgot that I was tamei. Yields two more cases. What are the two more cases? I remember that I was tamei, but what? I forgot that I entered into the Beis HaMikdash. Or I remember that I was tamei, but I forgot that what I'm eating is kodesh. Right? So those are the two additional cases. So those are the two that ultimately again become four. So the Mishnah now just elaborates on it. Nitma v'yada. So again, I became tamei. I knew that I was tamei. V'ne'alma mimeno, and then I forgot. V'ne'alma menatuma. V'zachar sakodesh. But I remembered that I was in the Beis HaMikdash. Right? Or I remember that I right. Or ne'ala mimeno hekdish. Or ultimately, again, another case could be that I forgot about the Hekdesh. I remember the Tumah, or I forgot about both of them. And I consumed Kodesh, yada, and I didn't know. Yada, and then after I ate the Kodesh, I remembered. Now I will say, so again, the Gemara is not really, the Mishnah is not fully explicitly articulating the cases. It's giving elements of the cases. But again, remember, essentially, any case where there is Yediyah B'tchila, the idea besof. So awareness in the beginning, awareness in the end, lapse of awareness in the middle. Now again, there's four different cases of lapses, right? There's two lapses of tumah awareness. I knew I was tamei, I forgot, I entered into the Beis HaMikdash, I remembered afterwards. I remembered that I was tamei, I forgot, I ate kodesh, remembered afterwards. That's cases 1 and 2, which then give 3 and 4, which are derivative cases. I know that I'm tamei, but I forgot I was in the mikdash, and then I remembered that I was in the mikdash. I knew that I was tamei, I forgot that I'm eating kodesh, and then I remembered that I was eating kodesh. In all of those cases, where there's awareness beginning and end, right, lapse in the middle, the liability is for what we call a carbon ola v'yored, which is a carbon as a sin offering that is based on your financial status. Right? If you have money, you'll bring one type of carbon. We'll talk about all this. And if you're poor, all the way down to, right? So in other words, the highest level is going to be a behema, and the lowest level is a mincha. A mincha. That's the range. So nitma. The person became tamei, and he knew, right? And then he forgot. But he remembered that he was in the Beis HaMikdash. Mikdash, or he forgot that he was in the Mikdash. And he remembered the tumah. Or he forgot about both of these things. And he went into the Mikdash and wasn't aware. When he came out of the Mikdash, he became aware again. Again, so we'll say same common denominator. Yediyah betchila, awareness in the beginning, awareness in the end, and halam, and forgetfulness, or lapse awareness in the middle, results in carbon ola v'yoreh. Next, echad. So we'll say, so now, interestingly enough, this is actually quite fascinating. We speak about entering into the Mikdash in a state of tumah. So now the Gemara is going to discuss what constitutes entering into the Mikdash. Echad hanichnas la'azara, so whether you enter into the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash, ve'echad nichnas l'tosefes ha'azara, or let's say you entered into an addition onto the Zara. So we're going to discuss the idea now that technically speaking, there are ways to extend the temple compound, right? But there's a process. There's a process. In other words, let's say Klal Yisrael decides, the Sanhedrin decides, we want to expand the Beis HaMikdash. We want to expand the footprint of the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, how do you add on to the Beis HaMikdash? So we'll say, so it's not just enough to start building stuff. You remember, you have to add, if you're going to add on, you want the additional area to have the sanctity of the Beis HaMikdash. How does that happen? This is incredible. Gemara says, She'ein mosifin ala ir v'ala azaros. So the same way, by the way, you could expand Yerushalayim. Isn't that incredible? If you want to expand the borders of Yerushalayim, you can do that. Now again, if I extend Yerushalayim, I don't just want to expand the municipality, I want to expand ultimately, again, the Kedusha. I want the Kedusha of the city to devolve upon the extended areas as well. So in order to do this, the only people who can do this are B'melech, Navi v'urim v'tumim v'sanhedrin shel shivim v'echad. So again, we'll get into this process, but this is quite incredible. If you want to expand the Kedusha borders of Yerushalayim, you want to expand the Kedusha footprint of the Beis HaMikdash, you could do it. But in order to do it, you need the king, the prophet, the urim v'tumim, which remember again is the 72-letter name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that goes into the fold, right? That's the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol, and a Sanhedrin of 71. Now whether you need all of these people, some of these people, we're going to discuss. Furthermore, ubishnei todos, you bring 2 carbon todos, ubishir, and there's Levitic song. What happens? Ubezdin mahalchin, Beis Din walks. Now again, I will say, we're going to have to see where all of this takes place. Where is Beis Din going? How are they going? Beis Din mahalchin, ushtei todos acharein. The 2 todos are following after them. V'chol Yisrael acharein. We'll say, whatever this is awesome. This is awesome, right? We are expanding the footprint of the Beis HaMikdash, expanding the footprint of Yerushalayim Yer HaKodesh. So how does it happen? You've got to get the whole chevra together, right? There's singing, and there's Sanhedrin, and there's 2 todos, and all of Klal Yisrael is there. So we'll say, Amud Beis, Hapanimis Nechalas, the inner toda. Now again, we'll have to see what all of this means. The inner toda is consumed, Vachitzon Nisrafes. And the outer toda ultimately is burned on the Mizbeach. And if you don't follow this process, then the expanded area does not have Kiddusha. The way the Gemara frames that is, therefore, if someone goes ahead and enters into a state of Tumah, ultimately, again, they are not Chayiv. So again, I will say, it's not clear from the Mishnah what exactly the process is, but one thing is clear, and we're very excited for this, there's a process. There's a process, and there is a clearly delineated process that requires, again, the king, the Navi, the Urim V'Tumim, all of Klal Yisrael, Shir, and Toda, in order to go ahead and expand the footprint of the Beis HaMikdash, or in order to expand, ultimately, the footprint of the Beis HaMikdash. Incredible. Of Yerushalayim, sorry. Nitma ba'azara. So we'll say, so let's say again, back to Tumah. So let's say again, we'll call him Ruvain. Ruvain becomes Tamei in the Azara. V'nel amana Tumah. So we'll say, so now in this case over here, something very interesting. This is a different kind of case. What's happening over here? Up until now, we've been focusing on a case where Ruvain becomes Tamei outside of the Beis HaMikdash and then enters into the Mikdash in a state of Tumah. Let's say it's a little bit different. Let's say halacha l'maisa, Ruvain becomes Tamei in the Azara. He's in the Beis HaMikdash. He becomes Tamei in the Beis HaMikdash. So we'll say, how does that happen? I don't know, a sheretz is there, or chas v'shalom, somebody dies right there, and Ruvain's right there, so he's becoming Tamei now in the Beis HaMikdash itself. V'nel ma mimeno Tumah, and again, he doesn't know about it, he has lapse of awareness, v'zachras HaMikdash, but he knows that he's in the Mikdash. He knows that he's in the Mikdash. Ne'elam heimenu Mikdash v'zachar Tumah, or he forgot that he was in the Mikdash, but he knows about the Tumah. Or ne'elam heimenu zevazeh, or he goes ahead and he forgets about both of these things. V'ishtachaveh o shesha b'chtei yishtachavah, and he remains in the Mikdash. So both say, so again, even though at some point he knew he was Tamei, right? But what? He remained in the Mikdash for a certain amount of time. How much time? Enough time to prostrate. Enough time to prostrate. Oh, balo ba'aruka. Or he realizes that he has to leave. But what does he do? He takes the long way out instead of the shorter way out. Chayiv. He's chayiv. Now, this is very interesting. So what this thing is like this. If Reuben becomes Tamei in the Beis HaMikdash itself. So watch this. Now read the next line. Biktsara pater. Now, interestingly enough, if someone becomes Tamei in the Beis HaMikdash and he realizes, oh my gosh, he just became Tamei, and he gets out of there as quickly as possible, he does not have liability for being in the Mikdash in a state of Tumah, right? Since he didn't cause it, this happened to him. As long as he got out of there as quickly as possible, there's no liability for being Tamei in the Mikdash. If, however, he became Tamei in the Beis HaMikdash, and what? Just either took his time by taking the long way out, or remained there for the amount of time it would take to prostrate, then there is liability. So the Gemara says, Zohi mitzvahs aseh sheva mikdash she'ein chayavin aleha. This ultimately, again, this represents a mitzvahs aseh in the mikdash for which there is no liability. Now what that means is like this. If you become Tamei in the Beis HaMikdash, and you realize it, and you get out of there as quickly as possible, you are not liable. You're not liable, even though there's a mitzvah. Remember, what's the mitzvah aseh? Rashi points out the mitzvah aseh over here is v'yishalchu min hamachane. The mitzvah aseh is that if you are tamei, get out of the Beis HaMikdash as quickly as possible, right? So, or I should say, or if you are tamei, you can't be in the mikdash. That's a mitzvahs aseh. So if you became tamei in the mikdash and you got out of there as quickly as possible, there's no liability. So we'll stop over here for today. I know we're stopping mid-Mishnah. We'll talk about another mitzvahs aseh for which there is liability to be continued tomorrow. Mazel tov on finishing the first parak. And again, I will say, tremendous hatzlacha on this new second parak of Shevuos. Shkoyach.